Piper Cub.
This has the date.
Yeah, I'll put the date on.
Okay. My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Alan Eggers. We're doing a video interview with Henry Dmitruk, who has been a lifelong resident of Linn County. Henry, can you tell us what year you were born and where you were born?
Well, I was born December 2nd, 1915, and I was born over in Stumptown, which is across the river from what used to be Wilson Packing House. And I guess folks had a little acreage or something over there. And I guess when I was born over there, I was baptized by Mrs. Popek, and one of her sons joined Collins Radio same time I did.
Bill Popek, correct?
Bill Popek.
No, really?
We started Collins the same day, December 7th, 1937.
What was your parents' names?
Michael Dmitruk and Irene
Did
Dmitruk.
you have any brothers and sisters?
Well, my mother had a brother over in Russia someplace. Oh, she had a brother in East Chicago, Indiana. And I guess they had some kind of a celebration and got some bad whiskey back in those days, and he passed away. I guess some of the others got pretty sick.
What was your folks' ethnic background? Were they Russian or German or
Russian?
Russian. Were they Russian immigrants?
Yes.
They come over here from. Did they ever talk to you about coming to the United States or why they come to the United States?
Well, I never got my mother's story on that, but my dad, I guess he traveled around on a ship for some time. Then he ended up down in South America, I understand, working on bridge construction there. He and Bill Popek's dad, they were down there together.
What year did they immigrate to the Americas? Did they ever say?
Well, it had to be before 1915, not too much before that, I don't believe.
Were you the only child, or did you have some brothers and sisters?
I had 3 sisters.
Where did you come in line? Were you the youngest or the oldest?
I was the oldest.
You were the oldest?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Did you tell us some of the things you did in your childhood for entertainment in around Stumptown? I'm sure you didn't get all.
Well, I didn't do anything over there because I was less than 5 years old.
Okay.
And I moved into Cedar Rapids shortly before I was 5. And we wound up on 10th Street and 11th Avenue Southeast. And I was about 5 years old when I had to go into the hospital for a hernia. I wound up down in Iowa City. And I guess I was homesick or something. I tried to get away from there. Got my clothes somehow or other, and I took off. They had to hunt for me. I thought I recognized the area there where I thought I lived, but I lived in Cedar Rapids.
You were born in 1915, is that correct?
Right.
Do you remember how the Depression affected your dad?
Oh, yes.
Or your folks?
We were on relief there for a while. Used to go down the county and get groceries and stuff like that, but that was, after I was 5, probably more like 10 years old then. Used to have to go down there to pick up some of the groceries.
Did you have to get a job when you was a little boy to help support the family?
Well, I went into the CCs. That was back in early 30s.
How old would you have been then?
Well, I must
16?
have been around 15, 16.
15. Do you remember any jobs that you worked on in the CCCs?
Down in Palisades, we made trails there. And then they had a cabin there. We worked inside of it, fixing it up. And, that was mostly trail building there. And then they transferred our whole camp up to Backbone State Park. And up there, we worked on trails and breaking big rocks up. Used a sledgehammer and all that kind of stuff, breaking up rocks, making little ones out of, making a trail through along that river up there in the park. They had the crew working on that lake, but I wasn't on any of that.
You were 15 years old. This must have been quite a venture for you to join the CCCs.
Oh yeah, that was kind of like Army life, you might say.
Did you enjoy it?
Enjoy it?
Did you enjoy it?
Oh, I did some parts of it, but I guess I prefer to be back home here where I was footloose and fancy free.
Well, of course, you were a teenager.
Well, and then too, I was interested in radio, so I was kind of kept away from that. And I always thought about having a radio station at CC's. And after I got out, well, I did talk to somebody that set up a radio station up there, and I talked to him one time.
I know you were a very avid ham radio operator. At what age did you become interested, and why did you become interested in ham radio?
Well, I probably started out first with maybe one-tube radio and crystal sets, when I used to have quite a bit of that. And I finally got a hold of a one-tube radio that I used to stay up late at night, see how many stations I could get on it, way back then. And somehow or other I found out about ham radio, and another fellow and I that lived on the flats, he and I learned the code and everything else, and we got our station license. I didn't get an operator's license right off the bat, and I had to go in for that later.
Did you find it hard to get an operator's license to study for?
Well, I had to, I passed the code test all right, but I had a little bit of trouble on the questions and answers. I guess I flunked the first time, but I later got it. And after getting it, I advanced to Class A license. To begin with, we started out with the Class B license, and Class A license gave you more privileges on the radio bands.
In growing up as a teenager, Henry, what were some of the fun things there was to do in Cedar Rapids to keep you out of trouble? Or even
Well,
get you in
winter time
trouble?
it was sledding.
Any favorite hills you slid on? That
We used to go up on 17th Street, just off of Mount Vernon Avenue, up the hill. 17th Street, they used to block it off for sliding. And people had bobsleds up there, and regular sleds and all that.
How about the summertime? Did you go fishing?
Well, I used to fish at the sloughs. That's up there by St. Luke's Hospital. I did a lot of fishing up there years ago.
Was the fishing pretty good then?
Oh, you catch some fish fast you could throw a hook in the water.
Did people, were they concerned about polluted water back then? And
Not back then.
back,
no. But
it probably wasn't polluted as bad as it is.
Well, they were dumping stuff in it. The first slough especially. But that slough is more or less gone. St. Luke's and all that, they've taken that all over.
When you was a boy, did they have trolleys?
Yeah, they had that in Urban that used to go down the hill back at St. Luke's Hospital. I think it went to Waterloo. And it went up 10th Street. I think it came off of 5th Avenue and turned up 10th Street and then went across 1st Avenue and A Avenue and then down behind St. Luke's Hospital.
Do you remember it going to Mount Vernon or in Lisbon, or was that before your time?
I'd never seen it going there.
It went to Iowa City.
Well, went to Iowa City.
Did you ever get the chance to take it to Iowa City?
Yeah, I think I did once or twice. That might be the way. Well, I don't know how I got down to Iowa City for my operation for hernia.
Yeah. How about dances? Did you ever go to any dances when you was a teenager or when you were young?
Well, when I got up more around 21 years of age, I guess I went to a few dances.
When did you leave home, Henry? How old were you when you left home?
Well, I'd say when I was 21.
21?
when I first got married.
Then what was your first job in Cedar Rapids?
Well, I would say that the CC's was probably the canning company used to have like people picking beans. I guess I did that. Either picked by the bucketful or sometimes they had it by the pound.
Where would the fields have been, the fields of beans?
Well, they were usually out of town, you know, a little ways away. They had to take the people out there.
You recall how much you got paid for picking beans?
Well, I think it was like 10 cents a bucket back then.
How big was the bucket?
Well, say not so big.
Kind of
I think the trick some people did was kind of fluff them up, you know.
And then what did you do after that?
Well, I think I worked at Iowa Steel there for a little bit as a helper. My dad was a riveter then, and I think this was after he had worked at the Rock Island shop and got laid off there. And then I worked out at the plant show for about a year, I believe.
And then you went to, you mentioned the fact you went to Turner Microphone.
Yeah, I worked there. They were making microphones and was also making amplifiers, PA systems.
That was kind of right down your alley, weren't you? Being the ham operator.
Electronics, firing up tubes and stuff. And well, they made microphones for quite a while, and they used to be on the market. And I think the way they started making these amplifiers, somebody there built an amplifier that they could use in the funeral homes. You know, Turner's is a funeral home, and then they had this on the side. They started this company making microphones, and then they started making the amplifiers. And I guess the way they got started, somebody built one of these amplifiers and used it at a funeral. And some of the other funeral directors seen this. They wanted some, so they had them built by Turner.
Then after Turner, where did you work?
Well, that's when I heard that Collins was hiring, which was my ambition to try to work there. So I went out there, inquired about a job, and got hired. And that was in the early days of Collins, when there might have been about 75 people working at that time.
Do you remember what type of equipment that they were building at that time? Would it have been heavy transmitters or?
Well, this was for ham radio. This was amateur radio stuff. And I went out to Arthur Collins' home before I ever worked there. That must have been around 32 or 33. And I bought a couple of insulators, isolantite insulators, and I bought a telegraph key from him, you know, to send code with. And I still have that. And I imagine it being a key that he probably used when he was communicating. But he was building transmitters in his home at that time, and then he started the company.
Was this a fun place to work back then? You probably
yes.
knew everybody.
Oh yeah, knew quite a few of the people there.
Did you have anything like paid holidays, or you probably didn't have health insurance or anything else?
No, we didn't have anything. And they finally started giving us paid holiday, one day for each year we worked. And I worked the hard way to get 7 days and
Yes, you
2
did.
weeks and everything.
Yes, you did.
And after the war, everybody that ever started Collins, I got 2 weeks vacation right off the bat.
Do you remember what your starting wage was at Collins Radio?
Yeah, it was 40 cents an hour, 16 a week.
And that was probably pretty good money
I
back then.
thought it was awfully good.
Yeah.
Well, I was working at Turner's for $12 a week.
How long did you stay at Collins then? Did you have to go into the military?
Well, I was in the Naval Reserve. This was a radio outfit, Communications Reserve. They called it the P3 at that time. And we used to meet down at the old post office on First Street. We had a room up there, and we drilled up in the attic, I guess, at the post office, where we did our march.
Yeah. Well, what year would have this been, Henry? Would this been prior to the bombing of Pearl Harbor?
Oh, yes. Well, it was before, I'd say maybe 34, 35 that I got in the reserve. And then, like I said, I went into Collins in January 1937. But I'd gone on like 2-week active duty while I was in the reserve. A couple of times I went on Lake Michigan on the ship. And then 2 times I went to Naval Air Stations. One time down in Kansas City and the other time at St. Louis. Lambert Field at St. Louis and Fairfax Field in Kansas. And well, while I was working at Collins, in 1941 they were asking for people to volunteer for active duty. And it was like at air stations. And I was interested in aviation, so that's what I wanted. So there's about 4 of us guys in the reserve that applied for that. And finally we got a notice that we were being considered for active duty, but it said sea duty. Anyway, I thought, well, as long as there's 4 of us going, I thought I'd go ahead and take it. And I went down to Des Moines where we took a physical. And there's 2 of us, 3 of us, myself included, that went down there, and I passed the physical there, and the other 2 flunked. They were fit for sea duty, I guess you'd say, but they later got air station duty, was what I wanted in the first place. But anyway, I wound up going to San Diego, and there we went through a refresher course, all the stuff pertaining to radio typing and practicing code and everything else. And then from there, 3 of us got assigned to the USS Detroit. So we got shipped over there. And the first day that we got over there, we managed to get some leave, go on Liberty. So we went over to Honolulu. Of course, we were very interested in seeing what Honolulu or Hawaii looked like. And so we were roaming around Honolulu there, looking at store windows and all that kind of stuff. And while there, I happened to be looking out toward the sidewalk, and I see a guy go by that I recognized. He was on one of the Lake Michigan cruises the same time I was. He was from Waukegan, Illinois, I believe. And come to find out that one of the guys that was with me that was from Waukegan, Illinois, knew this guy. So this is the very first day over there, run across somebody we knew. And then when we were getting ready to go back to ship, we had to catch a cab and go back to Pearl Harbor from there. And we was in this here sort of a nightclub, I guess, where they served beer and all that kind of stuff. I look up at the bar there and I see a guy from Cedar Rapids that I knew went to school with.
Small world.
A small world, all the first day over there. And I've had a lot of other incidences where something like that happened, run across somebody somewhere where I never expected to see somebody.
Did you remember the guy's name from Cedar Rapids?
Jerry Langer.
Langer. Yeah. Did you ever look him up when you later in life?
No. I always wondered what happened to him.
Yeah. When you were in Pearl Harbor at this time, Henry, was this prior to the bombing or after the bombing? Prior. Like what year, possibly?
Well, I was there in 40 and 41. My sea duty is probably about 10 months after going through school in San Diego, and then getting discharged. You go to a receiving ship and all that kind of stuff where they process you, and you may spend a few days there. And then I got shipped back to Cedar Rapids. And I was back to Cedar Rapids, went back to work at Collins, and I don't think it was over a couple of weeks where I get a telegram calling me back in. Well, I got a delay in orders so I could get ready to go. And I wound up at Road Heights, Connecticut, which is a comm pool. And they were taking radio men and putting them on merchant ships, for convoy duty. And while I was there, they picked out some people and sent them up to Canada to a radar school, which the English were teaching. So I wound up going up there. And I was up there December 8th, and Pearl Harbor was hit. And I was going to that radar school.
I can imagine you were radio communications at the time was very busy. There was probably a lot of traffic in regards to war.
Up until then, only while I was on the ship, I was operating radio. And also I got in like coding duty, helping decode messages. But anyway, during the time I was on the ship, we had a radio electrician, a warrant officer, that was transferred from the Detroit, and none of us knew where he went. And the first thing I walked in up there at Clinton, Ontario, that radar school, found out that this warrant officer was an officer in charge of that school for the American service people that went up there. Of course, we recognized each other, and that was quite a deal to find out he was there and all that.
Did you get involved in breaking any Japanese code?
No, it was just our own code that we used. They had several different systems for coding and stuff. One of the duties as a radio man, we'd copy what they call Fox skids. They had a station there in Honolulu that transmitted that, and these would be coded messages, and they had keys in there to tell what ships that should pertain to, but everybody copied that, and then they broke down what was pertaining to a particular ship that had a message coming.
So after the service, you come back to Cedar Rapids. Did you come back to Collins Radio at that time?
Back after 45, I mean after the war was over? Yes, I did.
Yeah. And then how long did you stay with Collins? When did you retire from Collins Radio?
Different times they retired people when they had a slack period. And this was in 1971. They let some people go. And they were giving people severance pay or early retirement, depending on how much time they had in there already.
That probably was right around the period when Rockwell bought Collins Radio.
Well, Rockwell bought them after that, I think. I can't remember what year.
There were some kind of tough times right there in the early 70s as far as Collins Radio is concerned.
Several times I thought I'd be laid off. Instead of that, I got a raise. That surprised the heck out of me.
Well, tell me about your flying experience in Cedar Rapids. When did you first get you were an active ham for years, and then you got an urge, you wanted to become a pilot or get an aviator's license?
Anyway, and they were giving people a chance to take up any kind of a trade or whatever they wanted.
Did you, was this on the, did they offer you anything with the GI Bill?
Well, I got this on the GI Bill.
Okay. And then where did you go? Did you go out to Hunter Airport to see about?
Yes, I went out to Hunter Airport, and that's where I took it up. I got in on a little flying while I was in service.
Oh, really?
Going up. I changed over to aviation radioman when I got down Key West. And so I was aviation radioman first class. And then I was recommended for chief, so I made chief down there, acting appointment. And after a year, you get permanent appointment. So I made that all before they came out with that duration ratings. So I had a permanent rating the whole time I was in there.
So when you first went to Hunter Airport, was it was this the large-scale operation, Hunter Airport at that time?
Well, I guess there's several people that had the chance to take it up under the GI Bill that did.
Do you remember who your instructor was?
Well, Harold Hall, most of the time, and then there was Terwilliger,
Dean Twilliger?
and I flew a few times with Red
Miner?
Miner.
Red Miner? Was he an instructor at that Red?
Yes, he was.
He was?
Mhm.
And he taught you that. One of our first video interviews we did was with Red Miner, probably 6 weeks before he passed away.
Oh, I didn't know he passed away.
Yes, he did, last spring. And I think it was in February. You boys went out and they did a 2-hour video interview with him.
Sorry to hear that. Of course, we're all getting up.
Yeah, we
20 years.
yeah. It's too bad you don't have your eyesight. You'd enjoy probably watching the video. You'd recall some of the memories he had from back then. So did you get your license then?
Yeah, I made my private license, and then I went on for commercial, but I never completed that. I probably still had a few hours of flying that I never got it.
Did you ever own your own plane?
Well, I was in that Collins Radio Club, had a share.
How many were there in the club with you at that time then?
Well, I can't say the exact figure. I'd say anywhere from 12 to 14, I think.
Was this something you did when you could afford it, or did you get to fly as often as you wished?
Well, this was something, had to pay so much an hour, and of course we paid for our share in the plane and all that. I guess I never did rent a plane, to fly. I just flew it on whatever time I could get when I was in the club. We had a guy that was working with us on a project there at Collins, and I guess he had applied for a job at Motorola in Denver, and he wanted to know if I'd fly him out there if we paid the expense of it. So he and his wife and another lady who worked out Collins, she wanted to go because she had a friend out there. So four of us flew in this PA-17, which is barely able to climb in that altitude out there. But we made it. And
Was that?
was looking for an apartment there so he could move out there. Didn't find it that day, so he told us to go back and he'd stay. So the three of us came back, and I thought with one less passenger I could fill a tank up. And I just barely got off the landing strip there in Denver. And they cleared us, got the clearance to fly back. And well, the weather's supposed to have been all okay. I started off from there after getting up about 400 feet, started heading east, and I saw these big old clouds up ahead, so I tried to go around them. Had a tailwind at the time, and pretty soon I was bumping all over the place, just about, I was fighting the controls. Finally got out of that, and I asked the girls if they were scared or worried. They said, "We thought you were doing all right." I was sweating under the armpits. But anyway, from there on, we had a headwind instead of a tailwind. And we probably got back to Cedar Rapids probably about 9:30 at night. And I gassed up at Lincoln, Nebraska, I believe it was. Came back in the dark. Well, I didn't have any trouble finding my way. But that was quite an experience. I did take another long-distance flight down to Oklahoma. Went to Beach Bonanza, and another guy, I think had more experience than I did, went along more or less as supervisor. I flew the plane most of the time.
Did you ever, is that probably the longest trip you've ever taken was to Plano, Texas? Or
Well,
did you ever fly to Minnesota, have fishing trips or anything?
well, I did, yes. We had a guy that was working with us at Collins, had a Cessna 172, I believe it is, and that was his own plane. And we had been talking about fishing in Canada and everything else, and one day he said, well, how about him taking us up there, and we shared the gas and all that. So we took off on a Labor Day weekend. Boy, we looking forward to that. Thought we were going to have a nice trip. So we took off, and we got up into Minnesota. I can't remember what place we landed near. Stayed there overnight. Next morning we got up, and there was a ceiling down around 600 feet. Well, we were watching we were listening to the weather reports and so forth. And finally we took off. This guy had practiced with instrument stuff. We went up through that overhead. When we got above that, you couldn't see the ground any place. And I thought, boy, I hope it opens up before we get up to International Falls. Anyway, we got up there and we cleared, well, it had visibility where we could land. And after we cleared customs and everything, we took off for Canada. And we got across the border. I could recognize these places where I had been fishing, lower part of Canada, Lake Despair, and Footprint Lake and all that. I recognized those. And we flew along the highway going up there, and what was it, Loran or whatever they used in those days?
Loran?
Yeah. And we was flying on that, and I guess the station is right there near Nestor Falls, or Sioux Narrow, somewhere in there. And we'd made a circle around the thing, and I thought, what the heck, we're going the wrong way. Well, so I knew by the highway which way we would go. We landed at Kenora, and left the plane there to go up the Red Lake Road toward Deer Falls. That's where our destination was. We took a bus part of the way, and then we had to hitchhike part of the way. And then the guy from up there at the Timberlane Lodge came down and picked us up. Well, we got up there and we had the rainy weather and everything else. We got out fishing one time, and that was all. And then we started back. The guy took us down to Kenora, and from there we took off. We was headed for Rochester, and we was hearing about the weather there and everything, so we kind of skirted around that, and we landed at Rochester and fueled up there and had some food and so forth. And we started taxiing out. We was asking about coming back in if the weather's bad, and we heard somebody call in and say the ceiling is 400 foot. So we turned around and went back, parked the plane, had a guy come up from Cedar Rapids to take us back to Cedar Rapids. On the weekend, we went up there to get the plane.
Sounds like it was one of those weekends you'd been better off take your wife shopping or something than stay home.
You may have heard the saying, if you have time to spare, go by hair.
You had mentioned in your previous interview about working out at the Collins hangar.
Yes. Well, they had a project out there. They was building this radar deal that could track an airplane and so forth. And I was on that project for a while. And, well, then I was assigned to the airport, and I was working around there helping whenever they had a installation for somebody's aircraft. And one experience I had that meant quite a bit to me, General Doolittle had brought in a transmitter. They were having that modified, and they finished modifying it, and he came in to, pick it up. Excuse me. So we put it in the plane, and I went out with Doolittle to tune it up. We took off and tuned the thing up, so it would be suitable for in the air operation. And while I was going down the runway, before I finished tuning it up, he went to make a transmission. I didn't have the thing locked in frequencies, So when he tried to change the frequency to this one operating frequency, well, here he messed up the whole tuning. So I told him to hold on a minute and I'd get it tuned up and let him know. So I did that. Had 4 frequencies on it that had to tune up. This is auto-tune. You could control it and switch whatever frequency you wanted from the cockpit. And after I got that done, well, he checked it all out on the 4 frequencies, and that is what the Collins hangar. They had radio equipment there set up, like a control tower. So anyway, we went up for maybe about 15 minutes, came back down. He taxied up to the ramp that went to the hangar, turned around, thanked me very much, and shook hands with me. I thought that was an honor.
This was the famous Jimmy Doolittle, General Jimmy
Right.
Doolittle.
Right. I thought that was an honor for me to get a
Yes.
ride with him.
Yes.
He was in that bombing Japan and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. You had mentioned earlier about the trip you took to Colorado. Did you fly out of Hunter and fly back into Hunter at that time, or was it the municipal airport?
I kind of think it was a municipal airport at that time. I'm not sure.
But the reason I was wondering,
Yes, I'm sure it was because we landed there when I came back.
when you took your training with, you said Howard Hall was one of your first flight instructors.
Right.
Was he a good instructor?
Oh yeah,
Harold Hall.
Harold Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he was really on you. If you made a little mistake or something, kind of rode you a little
Yeah.
bit. But then after he got all through, he says, "Well done, did a good job."
Did you ever run into Harold throughout your years?
Well, I run into him one time. I think he was acquainted with people a couple doors down.
Mm-hmm.
That person passed away. He used to run a tavern up on 5th Street, I think it was, near Green Square Park.
In all of your flying years, Henry, did you keep a logbook?
Oh, yes, I did.
Like how many hours approximately did you log throughout your flying years?
Probably logged over 200 hours, I think.
Mm-hmm. What was what was the most memorial flight that you've ever taken? Is there any one that sticks in your mind that you really enjoyed or really scared to death out of you?
Well, that trip to Denver.
One or the other. The trip to Denver was probably, that's when you were elk hunting out there.
No. This guy that worked at Collins that wanted to go do a job out there.
Okay. I had another question with when you were working at Collins, the people you work with, it was quite a small group compared to what it was in later years. Did you ever do any fun things together or have company picnics or anything?
Well, that one company picnic we had down in Palisades, that was the only one we had. And I guess they played ball, and like I said, Dr. Collins is kind of like a kid. He was climbing a tree there. I guess a couple of us were doing the same thing. Did Art
Collins pay for the food, or was it potluck? Did everybody bring something?
Well, I kind of forgot that. I think they furnished stuff. Must have had stuff there.
Mm-hmm. And everybody drove their cars down to it was down in the park itself, the Palisades
No, this
Park.
wasn't in the park. It was oh, this way from it.
The Upper
That's
Palisades?
Yeah, I think so. Somebody down there had a camp or something where I think we ran a cabin or something.
Wasn't the Biedermans?
I believe maybe that was the
And
name.
there used to be a hotel there, and they used to have a picnic area, a large picnic area.
Yeah, I think that must have been the outlet.
Was there, did Biedermans have any speedboats at that time that you could take a boat ride on? Do you remember?
Well, we didn't get down to the river, actually. I think we was away from the river where we had the picnic.
Another question I mentioned I wanted to ask you was back when you were young, during the Depression, you were fortunate enough that you got a job with the CCCs. But what about all of the other people, your friends, your neighbors, as far as jobs? Did they have jobs, or did they have a hard time finding jobs? Or
Well, I think that was pretty general.
Or was there any jobs
Stores.
to be had? Was there
Beg
there probably wasn't too many jobs to be had, was there?
No, it didn't seem to be.
Where would have been some of the places people would have been going to trying to get work?
Well, there's the packing house in Starch Work, Pennington Ford, back then, Quaker Roads, and the plant show, Iowa Steel Works. And I went to a place up in Marion, interview for a job. Oh, let's see, that was after I had worked at Turner's, I think. No, it wasn't. It was after I had experience at Collins as a machine operator.
You mentioned Douglas, the Douglas Starch Works. They had a large explosion there in 1919. I know you would have been kind of young, but do you remember anything, or do your mother remember her telling you anything about the Douglas fire?
Well, all I remember, I was very young, and we was on the 14th Avenue Bridge, and I think we was looking up toward the Starch Works at that time. I had to be, well, probably less than 5 years old then, I believe.
Were you on the bridge when it exploded, or
No.
you just lived up
This
in
was afterward, I was looking up there to try to see what you could see. But I seem to recall that part of it anyway. I wasn't old enough or had enough sense to really,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
analyze what.
For it to register in your mind.
Right.
But you don't recall the explosion itself? That didn't
No.
stick in your mind?
No.
It had been quite loud even where you lived in your neighborhood.
Well, I was probably living on 2nd Street or back of the Wilson Packing House. There was an area there where there's some houses.
Mm-hmm.
We lived there for a while. After that, we moved to, just across the railroad tracks from Iowa Steel Works going north. Used to be Brown Derby Tavern on the corner.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a couple houses on that street, and it's right next door to Brown Derby. We lived there for a while.
Henry, would you like to introduce your better half?
Well, my better half here is Grace, Dmitruk, and she used to work at Liggett's on the corner of 3rd Street and 3rd Avenue. That's how I got acquainted with her.
What was Liggett's? What business was that? Clothing store?
Drugstore.
Drugstore? Liggett's.
And they had a lunch counter there and so forth. And every day that I went in there, well, she was a cashier there at that time. And so we got acquainted with it.
The cute little chick. And
They-
how old were you? I said this cute little chick that ran the cash register at Liggett's. How old were you then?
Me?
Yes.
Well, This is after I got out of service.
Okay.
Must have been back in 46, 47.
What year did you get married?
1955, wasn't it?
59, yeah, right.
What is in the store now where Liggett's was then?
Armstrong, wasn't it?
No. Let's see, there was a hotel across the street.
That was Montrose.
You know what? I don't go downtown very much, because
It's
we got
okay.
all that stuff out here, you know.
You don't recognize it anymore. When you were growing up, did you grow up in Cedar Rapids, Grace?
No, I started in South Dakota,
Okay.
and I moved to Iowa when I was 16. My father passed away in South Dakota, so my folks weren't from Iowa anyway, so we came back here.
The reason I asked you, did you ever go mushroom hunting, Henry, when you were young?
Oh, a couple of times. My dad, I guess, was kind of more interested in mushrooms than I was, but he used to go out once in a while. And one time I was hunting up near Alcator, there in those hills, and I did pick up a few mushrooms up there one time. Just happened to run into them. And I wasn't an avid mushroom hunter.
Okay.
We've got or did have a brother-in-law, though. Boy, he'd pick them by the bushel, sell them every spring.
Down on 16th Avenue. Would you like to tell anything about your family or any of the children you had from either of your marriages?
I just had one child, Earl. And I had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. They all left me. I'm the only one left.
Mm-hmm.
And they are all teachers. My mother, and my 2 sisters were teachers.
Henry, how about your family? Are they still living? Your
Well,
your
my folks
sisters?
have both passed away, but have 2 sisters that live on 25th here.
Really?
And then my other sister lives on 16th Avenue. She used to be a nurse, but right now she's in pretty bad shape, overweight, and has arthritis. And she's in a wheelchair most of the time, not very able to move around.
When,
She started out at Mercy Hospital as a nurse, and then she was like a private nurse for several years.
what was her name?
Helen Lorenzen,
Helen Lorenzen?
yeah. And her husband that passed away several years ago worked down at the post office. Worked down there several years.
When you were growing up, were you close to your sisters?
Well, I guess I was until I left the home,
Mm-hmm.
going into CC's and all that. And
Still close to them now, though.
I think the older you get, the more you appreciate your family. I know I do anyway.
Yeah.
Well, unless you have something else you want to put on tape, the Linn County Historical Society would like to thank you very much for sharing your memories with us. And may you both live a long and healthy life.
well, I hope I made some good points there.
You did. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What happens to this?